The clock showed 9:30 p.m. when Carlos Rodriguez pushed through the heavy glass doors of Peterson Manufacturing. His worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he walked through the empty lobby. Behind him, his 17-year-old daughter Maya followed quietly, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her eyes taking in everything around her. Carlos had been cleaning this factory for 15 years. Every night he mopped these floors, emptied trash cans, and made sure everything was spotless for the morning shift. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and put food on the table for him and Maya. Tonight was different, though. Maya was with him because she'd been suspended from school again, not for fighting or causing trouble, but for something that happened in her engineering class. Her teacher, Mr. Wilson, had been explaining how car engines work when Maya raised her hand. "That's not exactly right," she had said politely. "The cooling system you described would create a feedback loop that would make the engine overheat." Mr. Wilson's face had turned red. He didn't like being corrected, especially by a student whose father cleaned buildings for a living. "Young lady," he had snapped, "I have a degree in engineering. I think I know more about engines than you do." Maya had tried to explain further, but Mr. Wilson cut her off. "That's enough attitude from you. Go to the principal's office." The principal, who knew Maya's family situation, was kinder but still had to follow the rules. 3 days suspension for disrespecting a teacher. Maya hadn't been disrespectful at all. She was just right, and Mr. Wilson couldn't handle it. So here she was, walking through Peterson Manufacturing with her father, trying to stay out of the way while he worked. But as they entered the main factory floor, it was clear something was very wrong. The huge space that was usually quiet and organized was buzzing with activity. Bright work lights lit up one corner where a group of men in dirty coveralls stood around a large engine. Tools were scattered everywhere. The smell of hot metal and oil filled the air. "What's going on, Tom?" Carlos called out to a tall man with graying hair who was wiping his hands on a rag. Tom Bradley, the head mechanic, looked up and shook his head. "Hey, Carlos, we've got a real problem here. This new engine has been giving us trouble for 3 days straight. Every time we think we've fixed it, it breaks down again." Maya stopped walking and listened. She could hear the engine running in the background, and there was something about the sound that caught her attention. It wasn't running smoothly. There was a slight, irregular rhythm, like a heartbeat that was just a little off. Tom continued, talking to her father. "Mr. Peterson is really angry. We're losing $50,000 every day this line is down. He's been here yelling at us all afternoon." As if summoned by his name, Richard Peterson appeared from behind the engine. He was a man in his early 50s, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the factory. His face was red with frustration, and his voice carried across the floor as he spoke to the mechanics. "I don't want to hear any more excuses," he was saying. "This is costing us a fortune. If you can't fix it by tomorrow morning, I'll find mechanics who can." Maya watched him pace back and forth. She'd heard about Mr. Peterson from her father's stories. He had inherited the company from his father, but didn't really understand the technical side of the business. He was the type of person who thought yelling louder would make problems go away faster. While the adults argued, Maya found herself drawn to the engine. She walked closer, staying in the shadows where no one would notice her. The machine was beautiful in a way, all chrome and steel, with pipes and wires running in precise patterns. But as she listened, that irregular sound became more obvious to her. She'd been around engines her whole life. When she was little, her father used to take her to the garage where he worked on weekends, fixing cars for extra money. She'd sit on a stool and hand him tools, asking questions about everything. As she got older, she started working on engines, herself, learning by trial and error. Their old car had broken down so many times that Maya had practically rebuilt it from scratch. She could diagnose problems just by listening, often knowing what was wrong before she even looked under the hood. Now, listening to this factory engine, she could hear exactly what the problem was. It wasn't any of the things the mechanics were checking. They were looking at the obvious stuff, the parts that usually failed, but this was different. The sound told her everything. The engine was overheating, but not because of a broken part. It was overheating because of a design flaw in how the coolant moved through the system. The cooling liquid was getting trapped, in a loop, circulating through the same area over and over instead of flowing properly through the entire engine. She moved a little closer, trying to get a better look at the cooling system setup. If she was right, there would be a specific pipe configuration that was causing the problem. "Maya, stay back from there," her father called softly. He was always worried about her getting too close to the machinery. But Maya had seen what she needed to see. Her guess was right. The coolant intake was positioned wrong, creating exactly the kind of circulation problem she had suspected. Tom Bradley was explaining the situation to another mechanic. "We've replaced the thermostat 3 times, changed all the coolant, checked every gasket and seal. The computer diagnostics aren't showing anything wrong, but it keeps overheating after about 20 minutes of running." Maya knew she could help. The solution was actually pretty simple once you understood what was really happening. But she was just the janitor's daughter. Who would listen to her? She looked around at all the frustrated faces, the expensive tools scattered everywhere, the piles of replacement parts that hadn't worked. These grown men, with all their experience and training, were stuck, and she knew exactly how to fix their problem. Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Tom Bradley looked down at her with surprise. "Oh, hi there. You're Carlos's daughter, right?" "Yes, sir. I think I might know what's wrong with your engine." The talking stopped. Several mechanics turned to look at her. In the sudden quiet, the irregular sound of the struggling engine seemed even louder. Tom smiled kindly but looked doubtful. "That's sweet of you to want to help, but this is pretty complicated stuff." "I know it sounds crazy," Maya continued, her voice getting stronger. "But I think the problem isn't with any of the parts you're replacing. It's with how the coolant is flowing through the system." She pointed toward the engine. "The way those pipes are connected, the coolant gets stuck in a loop. It keeps circulating through the same section instead of flowing through the whole engine. That's why it overheats in exactly 20 minutes every time." The mechanics looked at each other. A few of them glanced at the pipe configuration Maya was pointing at. "The intake valve is pulling coolant from the wrong place," she explained. "If you move it about 6 inches to the left and change the angle, the coolant will flow properly and the overheating will stop." Tom Bradley's expression changed. He was actually listening now, considering what she was saying. As head mechanic, he'd learned to pay attention to good ideas no matter where they came from. But before he could respond, Richard Peterson's voice cut through the air like a knife. "What is this?" Peterson had noticed the conversation and was walking over with his face twisted in anger. "Who is this girl and why is she wasting our time?" "Mr. Peterson," Tom started to explain, "this is Carlos's daughter, and she was just suggesting that maybe the cooling system design might be the janitor's daughter." Peterson's voice got louder. "Are you kidding me? We have engineers with college degrees who can't figure this out, and you're listening to a kid whose father pushes a mop?" Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she didn't back down. "Sir, I know it sounds strange, but if you just look at how the coolant flows—" "I don't want to hear it," Peterson snapped. "This is exactly what's wrong with people today. Everyone thinks they're an expert. A 17-year-old girl thinks she knows more about engines than trained mechanics." He turned to face the group of workers who had gathered around. "This is a professional workplace, not a playground. We have serious problems to solve, and we don't have time for children's games." Carlos hurried over, his face full of worry. "Mr. Peterson, I'm sorry. Maya, come away from there." But Peterson wasn't finished. "Carlos, I'm disappointed in you. Bringing your daughter here is bad enough, but letting her interrupt important work is completely unacceptable." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she was more frustrated than hurt. She knew she was right. She could fix their problem in less than an hour, but nobody would listen because of who she was. "Security," Peterson called out. "Please escort this girl out of the building, and Carlos, make sure this doesn't happen again or you'll be looking for a new job." 2 security guards appeared and gently but firmly guided Maya toward the exit. As she walked away, she could hear Peterson continuing to rant about people not knowing their place and maintaining professional standards. Tom Bradley watched her go with a troubled expression. Something about the confidence in Maya's voice and the specific details she'd mentioned made him think she might actually know what she was talking about. But Peterson was the boss, and the boss had made his decision clear. Maya's last sight of the factory floor was the expensive engine still running with its telltale irregular rhythm, still overheating, still costing the company $50,000 a day. Outside in the parking lot, Maya wiped her eyes and looked back at the building. Through the windows she could see the bright lights still burning in the factory, the mechanics still scratching their heads, still trying to solve a problem she knew she could fix. But she was just the janitor's daughter. And in Richard Peterson's world, that meant her ideas didn't matter no matter how right they might be. The next morning came too quickly for Richard Peterson. He sat in his leather chair staring at his computer screen filled with angry emails. The numbers were getting worse by the hour. $50,000 lost yesterday. Another $50,000 today if they couldn't get that engine running properly. His phone rang for the 10th time before 9 a.m. This time it was David Chen, their biggest client. "Richard, I need answers." David's voice was cold through the speaker. "My production line is waiting for your parts. If you can't deliver by Friday, I'm taking my business somewhere else." "David, please understand, we're dealing with a technical issue that—" "I don't care about your technical issues. I care about my $1 million contract. Fix it or I'm gone." The line went dead. Richard put his head in his hands. The Chen Industries contract was worth more than just money. Losing it would destroy their reputation in the industry. Down on the factory floor, Tom Bradley hadn't slept all night. His team of mechanics looked exhausted. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the work area around the stubborn engine. "Any luck with the new cooling pump?" Tom asked Jerry, one of his best mechanics. Jerry shook his head, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Same problem. Runs fine for exactly 19 minutes and 47 seconds, then starts overheating. I've timed it 5 times now. It's like clockwork." "What about the computer diagnostics?" "That's the weird part. The computer says everything is perfect. Temperature sensors, pressure readings, flow rates. Everything looks normal on the screen, but the engine is definitely overheating." Tom walked around the engine again, studying every pipe, every connection, every gauge. He'd been working on engines for 25 years, but this one had him completely stumped. At 10 a.m., Richard Peterson appeared with 3 men in expensive suits. "Gentlemen, meet our consulting team from Detroit Engineering Solutions. They specialize in exactly this type of problem." The lead consultant, a man named Dr. Harrison, looked at the engine with confidence. "Don't worry, Mr. Peterson, we've seen this before. It's probably a calibration issue with the fuel injection system." Tom wanted to tell them that they'd already checked the fuel system thoroughly, but he kept quiet. Maybe fresh eyes would see something his tired team had missed. By noon, the consultants were just as confused as everyone else. Dr. Harrison was no longer looking confident. "This is unusual," he admitted. "The engine design looks perfect on paper. All the components are working individually, but something is causing this systematic overheating." Meanwhile, Maya sat in her small bedroom trying to focus on her homework, but unable to stop thinking about the engine. She kept hearing that irregular sound in her mind, remembering the exact configuration of those coolant pipes. She opened her laptop and started researching similar engine designs online. Everything she found confirmed what her instincts had told her the night before. The coolant intake was positioned wrong, creating a circulation loop that would cause overheating after about 20 minutes of operation. Maya had first learned about engines when she was 8 years old. Her father's old friend Roberto ran a small garage where he fixed cars for people who couldn't afford expensive repairs. Carlos would bring Maya there on weekends while he helped Roberto with odd jobs. "Engines are like people," Roberto used to tell her. "They have their own personalities. You have to listen to what they're telling you." Roberto taught her to close her eyes and just listen. Different sounds meant different problems. A knocking sound might mean worn bearings. A whistling sound could indicate a vacuum leak. A grinding noise usually meant brake problems. But Maya had a natural gift that went beyond what Roberto taught her. She could hear patterns that others missed. She could feel when something was wrong, even when all the instruments said everything was fine. When Maya was 12, Roberto's own truck broke down. 3 different mechanics looked at it and couldn't figure out what was wrong. Maya listened to the engine for less than 5 minutes and told Roberto that the problem was with the timing chain. She was right. From that day on, Roberto started bringing Maya the cars that stumped him. She became his secret weapon, the teenager who could solve problems that left experienced mechanics scratching their heads. Maya never told anyone at school about her mechanical skills. Kids already made fun of her for wearing secondhand clothes and bringing lunch in a paper bag instead of buying cafeteria food. She didn't need to give them another reason to think she was weird. But now, as she sat in her room listening to the sound of her neighbor's lawnmower through the window, she couldn't stop thinking about Peterson Manufacturing. All those people might lose their jobs because of one simple design flaw that she could fix in less than an hour. She thought about her father, working so hard every night to keep his job. Carlos had never complained, not once in all the years. She'd known him. He was proud of his work even though other people looked down on him for it. Maya remembered the look on his face last night when Peterson had threatened his job. Fear and embarrassment mixed together in a way that made her heart ache. Back at the factory, the situation was getting desperate. The consultants packed up their equipment at 3 p.m., admitting defeat. Dr. Harrison handed Peterson a bill for $2,000 and a report that basically said, "We don't know what's wrong." Peterson's face was turning redder by the hour. He called another emergency meeting with his managers. "I want solutions, not excuses," he shouted at the room full of worried faces. "We're hemorrhaging money. The board is asking questions I can't answer. And our biggest client is ready to walk away." "Sir," Tom Bradley spoke up carefully, "maybe we should consider bringing in more specialists. Or perhaps we could contact the original design team and more specialists." Peterson slammed his hand on the conference table. "I've already spent thousands on consultants who couldn't solve a simple engine problem. How hard can this be?" "Actually, sir," Tom continued, "last night that young girl made some interesting observations about the coolant flow system. Maybe we should—" "Don't!" Peterson's voice was ice cold. "Don't you dare bring up the janitor's daughter again. I will not have this company's reputation damaged by listening to children's fantasies." Tom fell silent, but he couldn't stop thinking about Maya's confident explanation of the coolant flow problem. Her technical knowledge had surprised him. Most adults couldn't have described the cooling system circulation pattern as clearly as she had. By 6 p.m., word was spreading through the factory that layoffs might be coming. Workers whispered nervously in the break room about which departments might be cut first. Everyone knew that when production stopped, paychecks stopped too. Carlos arrived for his night shift to find the building buzzing with worried energy. The engine was still running, still overheating, still costing the company money with every hour that passed. "Any progress?" Carlos asked Tom, who was sitting on a toolbox looking defeated. "None. I've been doing this for 25 years, Carlos, and I've never seen anything like it. The engine should work perfectly. Every single component checks out fine, but something is causing it to overheat consistently after 20 minutes. Carlos nodded sympathetically. He'd seen Tom solve problems that stumped everyone else. If Tom was stumped, the situation was serious. "My daughter was really interested in the engine last night," Carlos said carefully. "She's always been good with mechanical things." Tom looked up. "She seemed to understand the technical details pretty well. Where did she learn about engines?" "She's been around them her whole life. My friend Roberto has a garage, and Maya used to help there when she was younger. She has a gift for hearing what's wrong with machines." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Carlos, I know Mr. Peterson was harsh last night, but your daughter might have been onto something with that coolant flow theory. The timing of the overheating, the way it happens consistently, it does sound like a circulation problem." Carlos felt a mix of pride and worry. He was proud that Tom recognized Maya's intelligence, but worried about what would happen if Peterson found out they were still discussing his daughter's ideas. As the night wore on, more bad news arrived. 2 more clients called to express concerns about their orders. The local newspaper was asking questions about the factory's problems. Word was getting out that Peterson Manufacturing was in trouble. Richard Peterson sat alone in his office at midnight, looking at financial projections that made his stomach hurt. If production didn't resume within 48 hours, the company might not survive. 3 generations of his family's work could disappear because of one stubborn engine. He thought about calling more consultants, bringing in more specialists, maybe even shutting down the entire production line and starting over with a different engine design. Every option seemed expensive and time-consuming. For just a moment he found himself remembering the confidence in that young girl's voice, the specific technical details she had mentioned. But he quickly pushed the thought away. Listening to why a teenager would make him look desperate and foolish. Outside his office window, Peterson could see the factory floor where Tom Bradley and his team continued working through the night, trying everything they could think of to solve the mystery of the overheating engine. Maya's words echoed in the empty spaces between the sound of tools and machinery. The coolant gets stuck in a loop. But Peterson was too proud to listen, and his pride was about to cost everyone everything. Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bed staring at the ceiling while the clock on her nightstand showed 1:47 a.m. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that engine sound again. The irregular rhythm that told her exactly what was wrong, and exactly how to fix it. She thought about all the people at the factory, Tom Bradley, who had been kind to her and seemed genuinely interested in her ideas, the other mechanics who looked so tired and frustrated, even the workers on different shifts who might lose their jobs if the company went under. And then there was her father. Carlos had worked so hard for so many years, taking pride in keeping that factory clean and safe. He'd never asked for much, just the chance to provide for his daughter and maybe see her have a better life than he'd had. Maya sat up in bed and made a decision that would change everything. She got dressed quietly, pulling on dark jeans and a black hoodie. Her father kept his security card in a small dish by the front door, along with his keys and wallet. Maya had seen him use it hundreds of times to enter the building. She slipped the card into her pocket and wrote a quick note. Gone for a walk. Couldn't sleep. Be back soon. If her father woke up and found her missing, at least he wouldn't panic immediately. The factory was only a 15-minute walk from their small apartment. Maya had made this trip many times over the years, sometimes walking with her father to work, sometimes picking him up when their old car was broken. The building looked different at night. Security lights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot. Maya could see the glow from the factory floor windows where the night shift was still trying to solve the engine problem. Using her father's card, Maya entered through the side door that led to the maintenance area. She knew the building layout well from all her visits. More importantly, she knew the security camera positions and patrol schedules. The security guards made their rounds every hour, checking different sections of the building. Maya had watched them enough times to know that she had a 40-minute window before they would check the main factory floor again. She made her way through the quiet hallways, past her father's supply closet and the break room where he ate his lunch every night. The familiar smell of industrial cleaner and machine oil filled the air. When Maya reached the factory floor, she could hear voices coming from the far end where the engine was located. Tom Bradley was there with 2 other mechanics, still working, despite the late hour. Maya waited in the shadows until the men took a break, walking to the other side of the factory to check on a different machine. This was her chance. She approached the problem engine with her heart pounding. Up close, the B design flaw was even more obvious than she'd thought. The coolant intake pipe was positioned exactly wrong, creating a circulation pattern that would trap hot coolant in a continuous loop. Maya had brought a small toolkit that she'd assembled over the years from garage sales and her father's spare supplies. Nothing fancy, but enough for basic mechanical work. She also had a notebook where she'd sketched out her solution the night before. The fix required 3 main changes. First, she needed to relocate the coolant intake valve about 6 inches to the left and rotate it 30 degrees. Second, she had to adjust the flow regulator to account for the new circulation pattern. Third, she needed to add a small bypass line to prevent pressure buildup. Maya worked quietly and carefully. Every sound seemed too loud in the quiet factory. The click of her wrench, The scrape of metal against metal, even her own breathing seemed to echo through the space. She'd learned to work with her hands from Roberto, but also from necessity. When you can't afford to pay mechanics, you learn to fix things yourself. Maya had rebuilt transmissions in parking lots, replaced engines in driveways, and diagnosed problems that left professionals confused. This engine was more complex than the cars she usually worked on, but the basic principles were the same. Coolant needed to flow in a specific pattern to keep the engine at the right temperature. The current design fought against that natural flow. As Maya worked, she found herself thinking about all the times people had underestimated her. Teachers, who assumed she wasn't smart because her father cleaned buildings. Classmates who made jokes about her clothes or her lunch. Even well-meaning adults who praised her for being good with her hands, as if that was somehow less valuable than being good with books. But Maya knew something they didn't. Being good with her hands and being smart weren't separate things. Understanding how machines worked required both technical knowledge and practical skill. You had to know the theory and be able to apply it in the real world. The first modification took 20 minutes. Maya carefully repositioned the intake valve, making sure all the connections were tight and properly sealed. She tested the fitting by hand, feeling for any looseness that could cause leaks. The second change was trickier. The flow regulator was calibrated for the original design, and Maya had to recalculate the settings for the new circulation pattern. She did the math in her head, double-checking her work by sketching calculations in her notebook. Mathematics had always come naturally to Maya, especially when it involved practical applications. Abstract algebra might confuse her, but calculating flow rates and pressure differentials was as easy as breathing. The bypass line was the most challenging part. Maya had to create a small secondary path for the coolant, using spare parts she found in the maintenance area. She bent a piece of copper tubing by hand, forming it into the exact shape needed to connect two specific points in the cooling system. As she worked, Maya heard footsteps approaching. She quickly ducked behind the engine, holding her breath as one of the security guards walked through on his hourly patrol. The guard's flashlight beam swept across the area where she'd been working, but he didn't notice anything unusual. After the guard passed, Maya finished installing the bypass line. She double-checked all her connections, making sure everything was secure and properly aligned. Then she closed her toolkit and stepped back to examine her work. From the outside, the changes looked minimal. Someone would have to know exactly what to look for to notice the modifications. But Maya knew these small adjustments would solve the overheating problem completely. She wasn't finished yet, though. Maya knew that even if her fix worked, no one would believe that a 17-year-old girl had solved the problem. She needed to leave proof that would make the solution impossible to ignore. Maya opened her notebook and began drawing detailed technical diagrams. She sketched the original design, clearly showing the circulation problem that caused the overheating. Then she drew the modified system, with arrows indicating the improved coolant flow pattern. She wrote careful explanations next to each diagram, describing exactly why the original design failed and how her changes would solve the problem. Maya used proper engineering terminology, the kind of language she'd learned from textbooks and online courses. Her handwriting was neat and precise. Each diagram was drawn to scale, with measurements and specifications clearly labeled. Anyone looking at these drawings would recognize immediately that they were the work of someone who understood advanced mechanical engineering principles. Maya also included calculations showing the expected temperature reduction and efficiency improvements. She showed her work step by step, the way her favorite math teacher had taught her years ago. When she finished the technical drawings, Maya wrote a simple note at the bottom. The engine should run smoothly now. The overheating was caused by poor coolant circulation, not component failure. These modifications will solve the problem permanently. She didn't sign the note. Maya wasn't looking for credit or recognition. She just wanted to save the jobs of people who had always been kind to her father. Maya placed the notebook on the workbench where Tom Bradley would be sure to see it when he returned. Then she gathered her tools and prepared to leave the same way she'd entered. But as she turned to go, curiosity got the better of her. Maya wanted to know if her fix actually worked. She located the engine's start button and pressed it, stepping back as the machine came to life. The difference was immediate and obvious. Instead of the irregular, struggling rhythm she'd heard before, the engine now ran with a smooth, steady purr. Maya smiled as she listened to the healthy sound of proper coolant circulation. She let the engine run for exactly 21 minutes, timing it on her phone. 21 minutes was the point where the overheating had always started before, but now the temperature gauge remained steady in the normal range. Maya turned off the engine and quickly left the factory floor. She made her way back through the quiet hallways, past the security cameras she'd learned to avoid, and out the side door into the cool night air. The walk home felt different than the walk there. Maya's nervous energy had been replaced by quiet satisfaction. She'd done what needed to be done. Now she just had to wait and see if anyone would recognize that the problem was solved. Back in her bedroom, Maya finally felt tired enough to sleep. As she drifted off, she imagined Tom Bradley's surprise when he discovered that the stubborn engine was finally running properly. She wondered how long it would take them to figure out what had changed, and whether anyone would believe the truth when they learned it. Outside her window, the first hints of dawn were beginning to show in the eastern sky. In a few hours, the morning shift would arrive at Peterson Manufacturing to discover that their impossible problem had been solved by someone they'd never suspect. Tom Bradley arrived at the factory at 6 a.m., carrying his usual cup of coffee and expecting another frustrating day of failure. He'd barely slept, his mind running through every possible solution he hadn't tried yet. The engine had beaten him, and he didn't like admitting defeat. But as he approached the work area, something felt different. The usual tension in the air seemed lighter somehow, and then he saw it. The notebook sitting on his workbench, open to pages covered with detailed technical drawings and calculations. Tom set down his coffee and picked up the notebook, his eyes widening as he studied the diagrams. These weren't rough sketches. These were professional-level engineering drawings, complete with measurements, flow calculations, and precise technical specifications. Someone had identified the exact problem with the cooling system and provided a complete solution. Tom looked around the empty factory floor, confused. Who could have left this? The night shift mechanics were good, but none of them could produce drawings this sophisticated, and the handwriting was neat and careful, not like the rushed notes his guys usually made. He walked over to the engine and hit the start button, more out of habit than hope. But immediately, he knew something had changed. The sound was completely different. Instead of the irregular, struggling rhythm that had tormented him for days, the engine was purring like a contented cat. Tom stared at the temperature gauge in disbelief. The needle held steady in the perfect range. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. At 20 minutes, the point where overheating always began, the temperature remained rock solid. This is impossible, Tom whispered to himself. But the evidence was right in front of him. Someone had solved their problem. He grabbed his phone and called Jerry, his best mechanic. Get down here right now and bring Mike and Steve with you. Within 10 minutes, 3 confused mechanics stood around the smoothly running engine, listening to Tom explain what he'd found. Look at these drawings, Tom said, showing them the notebook. Whoever did this understands advanced engineering principles. They identified the circulation problem we all missed and provided a complete solution. Jerry studied the technical diagrams. These are really good, Tom, professional quality. But who could have done this? The consultants gave up yesterday and none of us have this level of drawing skill. That's what I want to figure out, Tom replied. Check the security footage from last night. Someone was here and they fixed our problem. By 7 a.m., Richard Peterson had arrived to find his factory floor buzzing with excited conversation. The engine that had cost him thousands of dollars and countless headaches was running perfectly. He should have been relieved, but instead he felt suspicious. What happened? Peterson demanded as he approached the group of mechanics. Tom showed him the notebook and explained about finding the engine fixed. Sir, this is brilliant work. Whoever did this understood the problem better than any of us. Peterson studied the technical drawings with a frown. The quality was undeniable, but something bothered him about the whole situation. Do we know who did this? We're checking the security footage now, Tom replied. An hour later, the security team called Tom to the monitoring room. What they found on the recordings shocked everyone. The footage clearly showed a young person in dark clothing entering the building at 2:15 a.m. using a security card. The figure moved confidently through the factory, spent nearly an hour working on the engine, and left the technical drawings before departing at 3:47 a.m. But the biggest shock came when they enhanced the image quality. The mysterious engineer who had solved their impossible problem was Maya Rodriguez, the janitor's daughter whom Peterson had publicly humiliated just 2 days earlier. Tom felt his stomach drop as he recognized Maya's face on the security monitor. The girl Peterson had called ignorant and dismissed as a child had single-handedly saved the company. "Sir," Tom said carefully to Peterson, "we need to discuss this privately." In Peterson's office, Tom closed the door and showed him the enhanced security footage. Peterson's face went through several different expressions as he watched Maya working on the engine with obvious skill and confidence. This can't be right," Peterson stammered. "She's just a kid, the janitor's daughter." "Sir," she solved, "a problem that stumped our entire team. 3 expensive consultants and cost us nearly $200,000. Tom said firmly. "These technical drawings prove she understands advanced engineering better than most people with college degrees." Peterson stared at the notebook again, looking at the precise calculations and professional diagrams. His pride was fighting a war with the undeniable evidence in front of him. "What do you want me to do about it?" Peterson asked, his voice smaller than usual. "The right thing," Tom replied. "She deserves recognition for what she did, and more than that, she deserves an apology for how you treated her." Peterson spent the rest of the morning in his office, wrestling with the most difficult decision of his career. Admitting he was wrong about Maya would be humiliating, but ignoring her contribution would be dishonest, and Tom clearly wasn't going to let it slide. By noon, word had spread through the factory that the engine was fixed and production could resume. Workers who had been worried about losing their jobs were smiling and joking again. The crisis was over, but most people still didn't know who had saved them. Peterson finally made his decision. He called for a company-wide meeting at 2 p.m., asking all shifts to attend if possible. He also asked Tom to contact Carlos and request that he bring Maya to the factory. Maya was in her bedroom doing homework when her father knocked on the door. "Maya," Tom Bradley called. "Mr. Peterson wants to see us at the factory. He says it's important." Maya's heart started racing. Had they figured out what she'd done? Was she in trouble for entering the building without permission? "Did he say why?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "No, but he sounded different. Not angry, just serious." Maya and Carlos walked to the factory together, both wondering what awaited them. Maya had decided that if they confronted her about fixing the engine, she would tell the truth. She wasn't ashamed of what she'd done. The main factory floor was crowded with workers from all 3 shifts. Maya had never seen so many employees gathered in one place. Tom Bradley spotted them and walked over with an expression Maya couldn't read. "Maya, your father told me you've been working on engines since you were little," Tom said quietly. "Yes, sir, I have." "Where did you learn to draw technical diagrams like the ones we found this morning?" Maya's throat felt dry. They knew. "I taught myself from textbooks and online courses. I've always been interested in how things work." Tom nodded slowly. "You did good work, Maya. Really good work." Before Maya could respond, Peterson stepped up to a microphone that had been set up near the fixed engine. The crowd of workers fell, silent. "Everyone, thank you for coming," Peterson began, his voice echoing through the space. "As you all know, we've had a serious problem with our new engine design. This problem cost us money, threatened jobs, and nearly damaged our relationships with important clients." Maya felt her father tense beside her. Carlos was probably worried that Peterson was about to announce layoffs or other bad news. "Yesterday, our problem was solved by someone with exceptional engineering skills," Peterson continued. "Someone who saw what our trained mechanics, expensive consultants, and even I missed completely." Peterson paused and looked directly at Maya. That someone was Maya Rodriguez, daughter of our maintenance supervisor Carlos Rodriguez. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Many workers turned to look at Maya, who felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Maya, Peterson continued, 2 days ago I treated you with disrespect and ignorance. I judged you based on your age and your family's position in this company, rather than listening to your ideas. I was completely wrong, and I owe you a public apology. The factory floor was completely silent now. Peterson's voice carried clearly to every corner of the space. Your technical knowledge, problem-solving skills, and engineering ability are extraordinary. You solved a problem that professionals couldn't figure out, and you did it with precision and expertise that impressed everyone who saw your work. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but they were different from the tears of humiliation she'd cried 2 days earlier. These were tears of recognition and relief. Maya, I would like to offer you a full scholarship to any engineering school you choose, plus a guaranteed position here at Peterson Manufacturing when you graduate. The crowd of workers began to clap, and the applause grew louder and longer. Maya saw mechanics and factory workers and office staff all smiling and nodding their approval. But Maya surprised everyone with her response. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I appreciate your apology and I'm grateful for your offer. But I've already been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Another murmur of surprise went through the crowd. Carlos looked at his daughter with shock and pride. This was the first he'd heard about MIT. However, Maya continued, I do have a different idea. Instead of spending money on one student, what if we created a program to help lots of students, like me, kids who are smart and talented but don't get opportunities because of where they come from? Peterson looked intrigued. What kind of program? A partnership between Peterson Manufacturing and local high schools, Maya explained, her confidence growing. Students could work on real engineering problems while learning. They'd get hands-on experience, and the company would benefit from fresh ideas and different perspectives. Tom Bradley stepped forward. That's a fantastic idea, Maya. We could mentor young people while they help us solve technical challenges. Peterson was quiet for a moment, considering the proposal. Then he smiled. The first genuine smile Maya had seen from him. Maya Rodriguez, he said, you continue to impress me. Yes, let's create that program, and I'd like you to help design it. 6 months later, Maya was thriving at MIT while working part-time as a consultant for Peterson Manufacturing's New Youth Engineering Initiative. The program had already identified several talented students and solved 3 different technical problems that had been puzzling the company's engineers. Carlos had been promoted to maintenance supervisor, with a raise that allowed him to finally stop worrying about paying bills. But more than the money, he was proud of the respect his co-workers showed him and his daughter. Peterson had learned to check his assumptions about people. He still had work to do on his attitudes, but he was genuinely trying to judge employees by their contributions rather than their backgrounds. And Maya, she was exactly where she belonged, using her gifts to solve problems and create opportunities for others who might otherwise be overlooked. The girl who had once been dismissed as just the janitor's daughter was now known throughout the industry as the young engineering genius who could hear what machines were trying to tell her. The engine that had started it all still ran perfectly, humming with the smooth confidence of a problem solved by someone who truly understood how things work.